This is the story of the Arnhemland Progress Association, Alpa, as we affectionately call it. It's a very interesting story because it starts off from a very small beginning. The small beginning of 5 different mission stations and 5 different small shops. And those 5 different small shops up here became prosperous, and these other communities needed help with their shops. They got Alpa for help and became Alpa shops. And likewise, these shops needed help, became Alpa shops. And Alpa became a big institution. And the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations, Anthony Bevan, announced that Alpa had become the largest Aboriginal corporation in Australia. That's the story that I want now to tell you, starting from the beginning of the very small way in which this story started, with the Methodist Overseas Mission, starting with its base here in Darwin, Croker Island, Mindjalung Mission Station, Goulburn Island, Warrawee Mission Station, Milingimbi, Yorawee it's now called, Mission Station, Gullywinko Elko Island, and Yirrkala. That was the beginning of the missionary work in North Australia. As a young man, in 1963, I was living at Victor Harbour, and I went to a meeting with this man, the Reverend Doug Telfer. He was the minister at Victor Harbour. I was a local preacher and a Sunday school teacher and a youth leader. Went to a leaders' meeting with him. And on the way home from Goolwa to Victor Harbour in the car, I was telling him how discontented I was at Victor Harbour with the building. The people I was working for were, I was not happy. I had a lovely wife, lovely little 2 children. This one wasn't born then, it was 1963. I had a nice home, nice car, nice workshop. I'd achieved all the goals I'd set out to achieve as a young man. And I saw advertised making money in Western Australia, and I was talking to him about ways and means of making money. As I got out of the car, Doug Telfer said to me, "Ken, you sure there's not more worthwhile things to do with your life than just making money?" I didn't sleep well that night. This man had just come back from Fiji. He'd done 14 years at Fiji, working under this man. This man, the Methodist Overseas Mission General Secretary, Reverend Cecil Gribble. He was in charge of the worldwide work for Methodism in missionary work. And he was in charge of the work in Fiji. I learnt about him, I learnt about the work in Fiji. Eventually I decided to apply for missionary work, was appointed to go to Milingimbi Island, but before I could go I had to be trained. But I couldn't go to the training college in Sydney because I now had this little baby and there wasn't room in the college in Sydney for me with this family. So they nominated this man, the Reverend Alf Ellison, to be my trainer. He had just spent 14 years here at Warrawee, Goulburn Island. And he was the minister at McGill at that time, just back from Goulburn Island for around about a month, I think it was. And I used to go up to see him at McGill, and Judith was having blood pressure problems from the birth of the baby, so that was convenient that the doctor said she couldn't go north till she'd had the baby 3 months old. So I spent a lot of time with him, and he gave me a good orientation for my work at Milingimbi. And in hindsight, I think perhaps I got a better orientation from him to go to work at Milingimbi than if I'd gone to Sydney for the general course. He was a good man. And he's over here. This is Alf Ellison here. This is a synod meeting in Darwin in 1957. Now the church used to get together all of their leaders for a synod once a year. And this is 1957. This is Cecil Gribble, the big boss. He's here in this photo. And this is Alf Ellison, but this man here, the Reverend Gordon Simons, is the important man for Alpa. And that's why I've got this photo here, the Reverend Gordon Simons. And as we go forward, you'll see why he's important. He's down here at this synod in 1964, Reverend Gordon Simons. Cecil Gribble's not here because Gordon Simons is now the chairman of the district, North Australia district, and we'll see more of him as we go through. And fortunately, just a few weeks after we arrived at Milingimbi as new missionaries, this synod took place. And there's a lot of faces here that are still alive that are friends of mine at this particular point of time. And this is the Reverend Gordon Simons, an important person at this synod meeting. But let's look up here, because the Methodist Overseas Missions had a boat captain, Willie Wallalippa Gondra. This is him here. And it was important because we didn't have aeroplanes, we didn't have any other form of transport than sea transport. Our lifeblood was the sea, and this was the responsible person for our sea transport. And he had to be a very responsible person. And before he died, he was given an Order of Australia medal. He was a very responsible person. But he had a son, Ginny Nigondra, and this is the man that Alpa is their chairman of the board at this present time. He has an Order of Australia medal too. He has a doctorate. He's the Reverend Ginny Nigondra, OAM, Reverend Dr. Ginny Nigondra. This young man here, and we'll follow his journey through. But these are the boats, the Warrawee and the Larapan, that this man was the captain of, bringing the supplies through from Arnhemland to serve the communities. And this is the days before the cash economy. These workers for the mission were paid in food, flour, tea, sugar here, and that was the way the food was bought out, and they were paid in food kind. But it wasn't long before the government was paying in cash for child endowment, pension money, things like that. So we started a cash economy. In the cash economy, we were buying foodstuffs, putting it on shelves and selling it out of shops. At that stage, the boats were not adequate, so we started getting barges, but very small barges now, considering the very big barges which come today. And so time was progressing. And here we find Ginny Nigondra again. But here, a decade later, he's a young man, a teenager, doing an apprenticeship. And the Methodist Overseas Missions had an apprenticeship training scheme. A lot of the men you'll see later on as we go down in this were trained according to an apprenticeship training scheme. And the man here who's training him was the man who was responsible for looking after these boats. here's Jim Clark. He's the engineer responsible for looking after the boats. And he's training Ginny to be a fitter and turner. And Ginny is here learning how to make his own tools. And Ginny has written here how important it was for him to learn that, and how good it is that Swinburne University is helping now his own people to do this same kind of thing, because he found it so important to be learning a trade as a young man, and how important it was that the Methodist Overseas Missions had this training scheme for him. We go down to the executive staff in the early 1970s. This is the Reverend Gordon Simons here, a very important man. And you see Reverend Bernard Clark, Keith Hendry, Gowan Armstrong. This skinny man here is myself, and these other men are all part of the executive staff who made decisions in between synods. And the decision we had to make was, what's the next step after our over-the-counter stores? The next step was supermarkets. Down on the Gove Peninsula at Nhulunbuy, the Woolworths had set up. And were we going to hand over to Woolworths, IGA, Coles? What was going to happen? The decision was made to form the Arnhemland Progress Association to give the mission stations, to give the Aboriginal people direct ownership of their own shops, to appoint or to ask each mission station or each Aboriginal community to put forward a land-owning representative and a civic representative. And each of the 5 stations would put forward 2 people, making 10 people. And those 10 people would own Alpa. They would own the shops. And they would become legally the owners. No mention of church, of Methodism, of Uniting Church, anything. Just an Aboriginal organisation called Alpa to own the shops. Alpa was officially incorporated on the 20th of June 1972 under the Associations and Corporations Act 1936 of the Northern Territory of Australia, with its head office situated at 5 Nucky Street, Darwin, by the Methodist Overseas Mission. So really it was part of the Methodist Overseas Mission's office and still part of our organisation, but legally it belonged to Aboriginal people. And that was the important thing for Alpa. And here we find a production put out by the Arnhemland Progress Association in the early 1900s, in the early 1990s I think it was, where they had an old store at Ngungalala and they were moving to a new store at Ruminginning. Now Milingimbi Island had run out of water for the number of people and their population, and they had established a new community at Ruminginning, and they were moving over from Milingimbi to Ngungalala and then to Ruminginning. And in the move, they had started this new store. And these are the staff of the store as it was at Ngungalala, going to Ruminginning. This man here, John Ford, was the general manager for Alpa at that time. And George Rawnsley was the accountant at that time. And John Ford wrote this article, Alpa Assists Aboriginal Development. And it's a beautiful article. It's forward thinking on Aboriginal development. It's an excellent article. And George Rawnsley writes this article, Economic Skills Help Survival. And if you read this article, back in the days when he wrote it, you'd have thought that he was dreaming. But his dreams came true, as you'll see as we progress through here. Alpa has become what he dreamt it could have become back in those early days. George Rawnsley was a great man. He stuck with Alpa right through till, as an old man, he got TB and faded out. He never resigned, I don't think. He just faded out. He was a great man, George Rawnsley. But there were just these few mission stations here at that stage who were hanging in as part of the Progress Association. But we go up here and we find that there are changes afoot. This is 1990, and there's George Rawnsley. This is Henry Harper. Now I must take you back here once again because this is Henry Harper. Henry Harper, he looks a young, insignificant person. And when he was recruited, he came up from Perth. I was in Darwin at the time. And Henry tells the story that I said to him, Henry, get in your little Volkswagen, go back to Perth. You won't last a fortnight in the bush. We want an older, mature, responsible man with experience for this difficult job. But Henry just grinned at me. He stuck around. He went out in the bush and he stayed there. Now, take a look over here. This man here is Henry Harper. Alpa, 39 years by Henry Harper. Henry Harper today is working in Arnhemland. And I said over here he'd last a fortnight. He's still there. He's proven me wrong. I called him babyface once, but now I call him one of my best friends. He has become one of the most valued employees of Alpa. He's become a great man. He's done wonderful things for Alpa in doing a lot of different jobs. His current partner, Shirley, has done a lot of training things, and the daughter, Claire, when Shirley was breastfeeding Claire, Shirley was teaching some of these men over here how to be checkout operators. And Claire was a little baby in a basket underneath the table, and the men being trained thought they owned her. But she grew up, she got her university degree in nutrition, and I'm pretty sure that this Mr. Veggie person in this uniform underneath there is Claire. 90% sure, because that's what she used to dress up as. And Claire is responsible for a lot of what we'll see later on in the nutrition department. But Claire's not working with Alpa now, but she did do a lot of good work for Alpa, and this has become a great team. The man that I said would only last a fortnight is in his 39th year and going strong. Henry Harper. And this is Henry up here. Henry at this board meeting of Alpa. These are the board members. These are the owners of Alpa. They own Alpa on behalf of their communities, and they meet and make decisions about what's going to happen with Alpa. This is John Ford and his wife here, and they are meeting. And here we find George Rawnsley at the annual report of 1991, and he's talking to people about cooperative societies, and he's signing papers about cooperation. And we should have Stuart McMillan. His photo should be here somewhere, but I had to get a little photo and stick it down here because Stuart's a man who didn't want to put himself forward. But he is here. He's up in the back corner here. This is Stuart McMillan. You can hardly see him. Stuart McMillan was the CEO of Alpa from 1998 to 1988 till 1992. 1988 till 1992. He was the CEO. He could have had himself out in front here, could have had himself here anywhere, but he wasn't. But he has written some beautiful stuff here. What he's written here about cooperative societies is very good. What he's written here about his final remarks in this report is excellent. It shows the depth of character of this human being. It shows the importance that he put on his time at Alpa, and it shows the time that the imprint that he made on Alpa during his time with them. It was very important, the time that Stuart was the CEO of Alpa. In fact, all of the time that he spent with Alpa was a great time. And here we see he was the President-elect, Pastor Stuart McMillan. He is now the President of the Uniting Church of Australasia, the top man, and whether he likes it or not, he's getting photographed every day, and he's offering words of wisdom. And the Uniting Church, I believe, should be very honoured to think that they've got a man of such a high calibre as Stuart McMillan to lead them at this point of time. He's a good man. Alpa helped him to understand Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal people, which is helping him now in the job that he's got. And he helped Alpa. He helped train the board of directors. He helped people to understand real integrity of business. He helped in many ways. He was a good man helping Alpa. Next we find down here Ginny Ngondara, 1993. He's becoming the chairperson of Alpa, the top man. The young man, the youngest son of the boat captain, is now taking on the big responsibility of Arnhemland Progress Association with George Rawnsley, Senator Grant Tambling, and my old friend, which is recently deceased. This is Ginny in his big day. Before him is 24 years. 24 years later, he is up here. This is 24 years after he becomes chairman. He's up here. During that 24 years, he's taken Alpa from these mission stations to all of these yellow ones here. These yellow ones here, or Alpa at the time he took over was struggling financially. But cooperating with this man, they became financially able to have disposable income. But these other shops were suffering in many different ways, usually management ways, sometimes with staff, managers who were corrupt, sometimes for different reasons, and they asked Alpa to help them out. Alpa had a good system going, good managerial system, and they helped them out financially to be able to set themselves up and own their own stores and trade themselves into a good business. So they became Alpa stores. And these yellow ones here are Alpa managed stores. And the same with the red ones here. They're Alpa trading as Island and Cape stores. And they're all Alpa stores. And the Gainu newsletter has them all equal as Alpa stores. And the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations, Anthony Bevan, announced that Alpa had become the largest Aboriginal corporation in Australia on the 1st of the 9th, 2016. And that was a great day for celebration for this man, Jiniani Gondara, the son of the boat captain, leading Alpa to that great celebration. And here he is, cutting the cake for that celebration. Alpa's chairman of the board, Reverend Dr. Jiniani Gondara OAM. And here's an old man, a Methodist Overseas Missions man, having a look at what's happening and being very pleased with what he sees. Jiniani became a great man. He is a great man today with his people in Arnhemland right at this very point of time. Still a strong leader, recovering from cancer, but recovering well and being supported by a great family. Here he is with the board of directors. This is the board of directors today. They look very sharp and shiny and prim and proper compared to the scruffy looking bunch up here, which are looking very different. But this is a lovely group of people. Now, I don't know this group of people as well as I did know the group of people before them. I used to pride myself with knowing all the board of directors because I used to travel along the coast of Arnhemland and I used to know the people. But now you'll see there's quite a few ladies amongst this board of directors. Times are changing. They're a younger group and I don't know them as well. But the significant thing that I believe is that even though they're a younger group of people, they still have a heart and a memory for the Methodist Overseas Mission that produced their forefathers. And I believe the Spirit of God is there within them today as I relate to them in various different ways. The next photo is of Alastair King, the Chief Executive Officer of Alpa. Alastair and his wife Linda worked as managers for a few years before returning south to start a family. He had left a good reputation with all in the north, and when the directors wanted special help, they challenged him to return to the north. He accepted, and for the past 20 years, Alpa has increased from strength to strength. As CEO, Alastair has stuck to the letter of the law of the Constitution. Those who pondered over its wording and its intent would be pleased with the way Alastair for 20 years and Ginny for 24 years and the board of directors have functioned as a team to make Alpa the great organisation it has become. Below Alastair are some of the good men who are important part of the team. Now, Swinburne University is important because they are able to think outside the square. They have been most responsive to the educational needs in appropriate ways for traditional Aboriginal people, far more than Charles Darwin University or other educational institutions. And Swinburne has worked closely with what we will see soon and all of the things that have happened which are good from an educational point of view with Indigenous Aboriginal people. Now, over here we have Graham White. I missed him on the way through, but he is the first manager of Alpa, 1972 to 1976. Graham is important because Graham has something in common with the current manager, Alastair King. The first manager and the current manager are both men because they are men of integrity who the Aboriginal people regard as straight talkers, not goanna people or people who talk with a forked tongue. And that's the important thing which epitomises all Alpa managers to this point of time and has helped make Alpa a strong institution. Men of straight talkers who say what they mean and mean what they say. Now we'll go to the top up here, to this particular photo up here. And we see that this is the Employer of the Year. Alpa wins the Northern Territory Training Awards. This is Chris Haywood, 2015 winner of the Northern Territory Training Awards. Now this is not just Arnhemland, this is Northern Territory. If you stop and think about it, this is a big award. This is the whole of the Northern Territory, and these guys are winning that because they have got all of this jobs and training going. Chris is a great guy. I was very fortunate to spend a few days with Chris out at Gully Windcore, sharing a house with him for almost a week, and I got to know him a bit, just a little bit, but it was important. Chris is in charge of a lot of this work we're going to see now. His actual title is in charge of the jobs and training. And it's a whole diverse lot of work that he's in charge of. Retail training, RJCP programs, more RJCP programs, and the Milingimbi furniture is an important project which come under Chris's work. I used to do a bit of furniture making 50 years ago at Milingimbi, but what they're doing now is fantastic. If you go to Alistair King's office in Darwin, you'll find furniture there which is equal to any office in Darwin. The quality of the furniture made by these people is fantastic. It's furniture to be proud of. And the other jobs that Chris is involved in, he's here with the concrete workers, he's here with the builders, he's got the mechanics going, he's here with the boat builders, he's here with the rebuilding team. Chris is involved in many different things. And here are the key achievements of Alpa over the past 12 months. These are just the key ones. The key achievements. 2015, Training Awards, Employer of the Year. 2015, Keep Australia Beautiful Environmental Award. 2016, Outstanding Achievement Award. Australian Charity Awards. 1,187 employees, of whom approximately 85% are Indigenous. That's great. Opening a $3.5 million self-funded store at Gullywinkel, Elcho Island. That was a big achievement. And this here is the biggest one, I think. $16 million contributed to the 5 member communities of Gupawiak, Milingimbi, Minjalung, Ramanginning, Gullywinkel as wages, benevolent programs and capital infrastructure upgrades. That means $16 million going to these black ones who are the foundational stores. That's the profits going to them, not to individual people's pockets, but to things like benevolent programs, capital infrastructure upgrades, wages and things like that. Money which is benefiting them in a very real way. And a $1.5 million self-funded regional economic development centre built in Darwin. Now these are just some of the key achievements that Alpa has been able to achieve over the last 12 months. They are great achievements, but the real achievements are the community development programs. This is really what the name of the game is. Community development. It's these programs which help close the gap of Indigenous disadvantage. And that's the name of the game. And that's where Chris Haywood is working and where this man here, Peter Gumbel, is working. He's the Ramanginning CDP supervisor. Now this man's brother, I worked with him for 10.5 years at Milingimbi, and he was the most intelligent Aboriginal that I've ever worked with. And if Peter Gumbung, I don't know him quite as well as his older brother, but if he's anywhere near as good as his older brother, he'll have some good community development programs going, which will help raise the awareness of the people. And what Peter Gumbung is saying, and Chris Haywood is saying, for their community development programs, which are great programs, is that they're programs to increase the people's feelings of well-being, to strengthen their identity, to raise their self-esteem, to reinforce their group solidarity, motivating them to a highly liberated feeling of freedom to be positively creative. And the results are transformative, moving speedily towards closing the gap of Indigenous disadvantage. This final chart that we have is of Alpa and all the wonderful things that are happening, but I want to focus on this particular man, on this particular photo, because that's the important person I want to talk about. This title is the Milingimbi Town Council, 1976. And this young man is called Matthew Dollenburg in 1976. On this chart here, we've got Matthew Dollenburg here, 9th of the 8th, 2016. 40 years difference between this photo of Matthew Dollenburg and this year, this photo. 40 years difference. Now, this is quite a big story, and it starts with this date is just a few days after my birthday. Alpa gave me a trip to Ramingining a day before my birthday, and they had staff going out to Ramingining in the morning and staff coming back from Ramingining in the afternoon, and they had a spare seat on the charter plane. They allowed me to take that spare seat and to spend a few hours at Ramingining. I did that, and when I got to Ramingining, this man here had a meeting going with all of these Aboriginal elders, these elders here, and they were preparing for this man to come the week after to ask them questions about how to keep the juvenile delinquents out of the Dondale Centre because they were causing so many problems. And so this man had two big whiteboards up, and he was writing up in Technicolor, red and black, and the elders were giving him ideas of what they would tell this man what to do to look after the juvenile delinquents. And he was doing it in a very professional way. He was writing up mainly in English, a little bit in Gupapoingo, but he was listening to them in 4 different dialects as they were talking to him. And I was sitting in as an observer to their meeting. And I observed on the top of the whiteboard the big letters, empowerment of local communities. Empowerment of local communities. That was the big thing that they wanted. Now, I had old friends I wanted to visit at Ramingining, so I couldn't stay long at their meeting. I went off to visit them, and then a week later, after this man is supposed to have visited, I rang up Dollenburg and I said to him, "What happened at the meeting?" He said, "Oh, look up Channel 9 News tonight and you'll see a report of the meeting." Now, my television wasn't too good, and so I got in touch with Alpa, Alistair King, and said to Alistair, "Look, could you copy this for me? Because I'm interested to see what happened when they this guy got out there and he got onto his technical staff and they took a USB of this meeting. And these photos here come off that USB that Alistair Alpa got for me. And that's where these photos came from. And it's a very different meeting to what these elders expected. They didn't expect that the commissioner, Reece Kershaw, would bring this host of policemen out with him. They didn't expect that Rosie Batty, the Australian of the Year in 2015, that she would come out and want to hug the women for doing things right at Rum-and-Ginning. They didn't expect that Charlie King would come out. He'd been the man that had been on television with all the footballers talking about non-violence. He was the television man. They didn't expect to see him. It was not expected that this should happen. But it did happen. These distinguished people came out and praised them for their control of violence at Rum-and-Ginning, that they were doing things right, closing the gap of Indigenous disadvantage. And these people, they listened to what the elders said. And here you see Jiwada talking, and you see Charlie King leaning forward listening, and the commissioner listening to what he had to say. And they would have understood what he had to say. Sometimes here at Victor Harbour, I get a phone call and I lift the receiver and I say, think now, who's that? Is that somebody from Europe or Britain or from Canberra? And then I think, no, that's Jiwada. He's speaking the Queen's English. That's the English that Beulah Lowe taught him. That beautiful, delightful linguist at Victor Harbour taught him the Queen's English. And that's Jiwada. And I talked to Jiwada on the phone. And Jiwada would be talking to him in beautiful English and communicating well. And Jiwada's job is with the magistrate. And the magistrate, when he comes out into community, sometimes I've been told won't hold the court unless Jiwada is there to work beside him and help him to understand what's happening. So what better person could you have to be telling the chief policeman about juvenile delinquents than Albert Jiwada? He's a great wise man. He met me back in 1964 and he's been my friend since 1964. Albert Jiwada. The same with Dullenburg. Dullenburg is a great communicator. Dullenburg's father, the older brother from this man up here. Dullenburg's father, Dawdangulili, was a very important man. At the same time as Cecil Gribble, the same time as Willie Wallalippa Gondara, Dawdangulili was the leader of the Gupapoingal people at Milingimbi. And this man, although he was the council leader and the spokesman for the people, he wouldn't make a decision till after he had talked to this man's father. Because Dawdangulili had the wisdom as an old man. And today I can hear Dawarango Lily's wisdom coming from Dolenburg, as he's the leader for the Yongo Makarduni, as he's the leader who speaks and organises for his people. So we've got wisdom from the elders here, and they're being listened to. And I think that's a wonderful thing. There are many more stories that I could tell which are similar to this story, which Alpa helped me to get out to Ramanginning to be part of, to tell this story today. Many other people who are similar to Chiwara and Dolenburg that I could tell stories about. But Alpa helped me to get to Ramanginning and helped me to set up this story. So I am telling this story to you today because it's a good, true story, and it's a story that I'm proud of. Let us join with Alpa, the chairman, the board of directors, the CEO, and the staff, that they will continue to strive to build healthy, loving, caring communities throughout the whole of the top end. Thank you.